Well, hello to all my timeless beauties. Today I was feeling me some 90s vibes. I was at a market a couple of months ago and it was in Fitzroy, which is, inner city Melbourne, grungy, super cool, where the cool kids hang out. Those kids that are on the tickety tock. And all the stores were called vintage fashion. And vintage fashion, my friends, if you're in your 40s, is the 90s now. And the prices were outrageous. I was looking at clothes going, oh my God, I totally wore that. And that was totally not $100. Fashion store. And the kids were just, killing themselves to buy this stuff like it was the biggest bargain of the century. And I just could not stop laughing. Oh, jeez. Anyway, it made me kind of nostalgic for what I used to do in the 90s. So I'm 45, so in the 90s I went to high school and was in my early 20s at the end of the 90s. And so it was a real, they were my formative years of going out and dating for the first time and, getting drunk and going to uni and moving out of home, all that stuff. And this was definitely the look that I went for back in the day. So I'd go for smudgy eyeliner, matte face. Bronzer didn't exist in my world anyway. Glossy skin didn't exist in my world. I don't think anyone's world. It was all matte face, no highlighter, no gloss. I think there was a bit of contouring happening, particularly in supermodels like Cindy Crawford's and Claudia's. Those people, they were definitely doing contouring, but it hadn't really translated into the real world. Talking marks was very 90s. You wouldn't say hashtag real world, you'd go real world. Social media didn't exist. It was a simpler time. Mobile phones only. I think I only got a mobile phone for the first time in my early 20s and we didn't use it. Like, you'd have this mobile phone, never had it on, never knew where it was. It was really for emergencies only. Certainly didn't have predictive text when they first came out. I think they had the ability for predictive text, but it wasn't turned on yet. So people would still call on the home phone and you would answer that phone and not know who it was. You'd also make plans to meet friends. I used to plan to meet friends at uni. Like, after classes, we'd say, right, let's meet at this tree or wherever and go to the pub, and you turn up. And then if they didn't turn up, you couldn't just text them or call them and say, where are you? You have to decide how long you waited and whether you went home again or if you just waited for an hour. And if you waited for an hour, you didn't have a phone to scroll through. Like, what did you do? Just sit there like a weirdo looking at people. Guess you listen to music on your Walkman. I had one of those waterproof Sony yellow Walkmans that were in my ears all the time. With cord earplugs, because they weren't cordless back then. Oh no. And they ran on, they were on batteries, so you never knew when your battery life was going to die and then you'd be left without music, which is terrible. And you'd be on the train going to uni listening to music, and half the time you'd be like, I wonder if that person over there can hear my music and thinks I'm cool. And then the other half you'd be like, oh, I really hope they can't hear my music because it's not cool. No iPads. I don't even think back then there were really laptops around either. So you really just had your Walkman. That was it. And a book, a real book, not a book on a Kindle, but a real book with pages that were heavy. So you used to have to lug everything around in your backpack. So I'd have a backpack for uni, and it was always one of those backpacks people had that you get from army disposals. And you'd have, all your books in there. You'd have to have your massive Walkman. You'd have your headphones and not a water bottle. People didn't drink water from water bottles out and about back then. Were we just really dehydrated? I don't know. Anyway, enough. Enough with the chit chat. Let's get into my 90s Lizzie's 90s grunge tutorial and have a bit of fun. Okay, so for true 90s matte powder base, I'm going to go in with my e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer, my right way around. It ain't about glowing skin in the slightest in the 90s. You had to be powdered within an inch of your life. Not the Skerricker shine was to come through. Which is literally the complete opposite to how I do my makeup today. This is good as over the eyes as well. Okay. Alright, looking at kind of. Because we're going to be using powder foundation, I'm going to do my concealer first. And I've got out the good old Maybelline Eraser Instant Age Rewind, because that was around in the 90s, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure the first primer that I used was in the 90s, and it was the Laura Mercier primer. I read an article in Vogue, I remember at the time, and the Vogue editor was saying how it kept her makeup on all day. And I remember just being really excited about that and going out and buying it, saving all my money, because I got paid nothing back then. When I first lived out of home, I don't know how I did it. I remember watching In Bed with Madonna, that Madonna documentary. And Laura Mercier, I'm pretty sure it was Laura Mercier, was her makeup artist. And I just remember thinking she was so glamorous and French and amazing. I'm just going to use the Nars Soft Matte Complete Concealer in medium 1 custard just to go on my nose. Mascara. So now we're going to go in the powder foundation. I'm going to use the Bare Minerals Original. Gosh, this was such a huge 90s thing. I also really loved the Body Shop had a powder foundation. I was pretty sure it was called the All-in-One Complete Face Base, and it just cancelled everything out on my face, and I bloody loved it. Dip my brush into the pot and then swirl it in the lid, and then just go in. Now, I would have done this back in the day with one of those really dense kabuki brushes for maximum coverage, but I thought of doing that makes me feel quite ill. So the whole idea was really to cancel out your entire face. Definitely cancel out your freckles. Definitely, freckles were not seen as cute back in the 90s. Seen as something that you definitely had to eradicate with makeup. When I think of the 90s, what do I think about? I think about cargo pants. I think about All Saints wearing cargo pants, little crop tops. I also think about flannelettes. We used to wear a lot of flannels back in the 90s. I remember my final year at school, big party, everyone was wearing definitely cargo pants and red flannel shirts. It was a real baggy vibe. We used to wear our school dresses way too big for us, really long hems, long socks. If you wore short socks at school, you'd only ever do that for one day, and then you'd realise that was a wrong move. It was all about long socks. And yeah, makeup was matte. Definitely, I don't think highlighter existed. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I went backpacking in Europe, as you did. And I think I went for 2 months, and and I still remember the makeup that I took. I took a Max Factor pan stick, and that would be my foundation and my concealer. The all-in-one face base from the Body Shop, which again would put over the pan stick, oh God. And I took a Lancome black coal eyeliner, smudgy black coal eyeliner that I'd smudge as eyeliner and also could use as eyeshadow. And I took mascara, I can't remember, I think it was Maybelline Full and Soft mascara. That was the mascara of the day. Then I also bought a Body Shop, I'm pretty sure they were called All Over Colour sticks, and it was like a rosy, dusky rose colour, and you're meant to be able to use them on your cheeks, your lips and your eyes if you wanted to. So it was like multifunctional. So I had those products, and that is what saw me through 8 weeks in Europe backpacking. Definitely no brow products. I just went around with my very fair blonde brows that you couldn't really see. And in all photos of me, you pretty much couldn't see my brows because they would just fade into my skin. Bronzer wasn't a thing either, and neither really was fake tanning. Fake tanning was probably products were just starting, but they were pretty bad. So like the formulations were pretty orange, pretty streaky. So that kind of didn't become a thing really, I think, until probably late 90s, probably 2000s actually, I would say. So even though bronzer wasn't a thing, that kind of bronzy colour for blush was a thing. So I think I'm gonna mix those two together. Let's do the old, whoa, okay, all right, let's do that on the other side. And then just grab a Real Techniques blush brush. Gosh, those e.l.f. blushes are so pigmented. You know, when I went to Europe, obviously there was no social media back then, and also no mobiles. Like, we didn't take mobiles, definitely didn't take mobiles with you overseas. So the only way I could communicate with my family and friends was to either call them or to email them. So you go to these email cafes, cyber cafes, I think they were called, and you'd pay by the hour. You'd get onto your Yahoo and knock out a bunch of emails. And I would save my pennies, and every now and then I'd call my best friend Heidi. I remember calling her, and she's still my best friend today, which is nice. And calling my parents every now and then, probably once every 2 weeks. So it was really weird just to be not connected. Like, you just really fall off the face of the earth when you went overseas. And you wouldn't be posting photos or anything because you didn't have digital cameras. You had old school cameras that you had to develop with film when you got back. And in a way, like, you know, I think as with anything in life, there are pros and cons to that. Like, I can't imagine my daughter going off overseas for a length of time and just, you know, not hearing from her or knowing she's okay. Because, you know, I booked nothing. I just did the whole backpacking thing, just rock up somewhere and go to a hostel. Had our Lonely Planet books. You had to haul around these massive books because nothing was electronic. There was no iPads, obviously, no Kindles, no nothing. So you had books. That was so heavy. And you just look up, yeah, where you were that night and try and find somewhere to stay the night. I mean, it's amazing looking back at that now, but it just was what everybody did. But it was hard. Also, not speaking language because you had no translation apps or anything either. So you just kind of had to. I still remember being I think I was in Spain and trying to find a bloody train station and just asking those people, did they speak English? And they probably did, but they all just said no. And then finding someone, and he said, I remember him saying he spoke French or Spanish. So then I managed to bring out my old Year 10 French, où est le métro? And he was able to point me in the right direction, or else I was going to miss this major train and probably sleep on the streets. That's how the blush is looking. Definitely didn't want pink blush. It was all about looking grungy. This is full on. This was the grunge era. Like, man, I was so into Pearl Jam, so into Mother Bone, so into Alice in Chains. They were all on my mixtapes. Of course, I was into Nirvana, but everyone was into Nirvana. Yeah, that Seattle grunge sound, that was the soundtrack to my life at that time. Okay, so for eyes, I'm just gonna do my kind of grungy pencil thing that I used to do. And I'm going to start with a by Terry Ombre Blackstar in Bronze Moon, and I'm just going to use this to scribble a very imprecise shape like that. Upper and lower, and then before it sets, just kind of going to smoke it out. I was watching Charlie, what is it, XCX? I think that's who she is, on the Vogue Secrets, which also totally inspired me to do this. Okay, so this is how we're looking at this point. Okay, so at this point I would then go in with the Lancome Kohl, but I'm going to use much superior, much more precise Shiseido Microliner ink to get close to the lash line. And again, you're going to blend this out, so don't worry about being too precise. And then definitely blacken the lower rim. One of these eye brightening pale shades. You wanna, not for grunge. Oh no, you wanna look like you haven't slept for 10 days. I'm just gonna add a bit of, from the Pink Pal duo, I'm gonna add a bit of the matte soft brown just into the crease. It's funny, my partner and I were talking about the 90s and what we did for socializing. So when we were like teenagers, it was all about the house party. Go to someone's house, there'd be lots of alcohol. I remember my first real drink was Midori, and then I quickly went on to bourbon and cokes. And we would go to people's houses, and I kind of lived a little bit more rural, not massively rural, but there were sheep and cows. And we'd go to people's houses for parties, and they'd often have be on massive blocks of big backyards. So we'd have like a bonfire or something, and we'd all be sitting around being freezing and drinking, passing out in bushes. And now I look at, you know, house parties, my partner and I are like, where were the parents? Like, I just felt like they weren't there. Like, where were they? Were they there? You just let us do it? Or... Okay, blended. Alright, I'm gonna move on to eyebrows. And I definitely would have used one of these eyebrow pencils with one of these on the cap. Let's see if I can do this. That is if I did my eyebrows. As I said, I don't reckon I did. Like, I don't think it was a priority. But I did just look at a photo of me, which I'll pop up, from the 90s. When I was in Europe, I was in Italy. I was in Rome, actually, in the photo. And of course, the photo quality weren't great back then, but it does look like I've filled in my eyebrows, so maybe I did. If I did, I definitely just used one of these. They were all that was available, I'm pretty sure. I definitely wouldn't have curled my eyelashes back in the 90s. I'm just going to use my Modelco Lash Xtend mascara. Just a tubing mascara. I think tubing mascaras might have come out late 90s. I feel like I did try one back then. Definitely no false eyelashes, definitely not the people I hung out with anyway. It's funny, I was watching a Clementine Ford talking about Reality Bites, which was the quintessential movie that I based all the boys that I wanted to pursue on Troy, which is Ethan Hawke, who I absolutely loved him and that character. And now looking back on it, just how toxic he was. Like, he wasn't nice to Lelena, aka Winona Ryder, at all. And, you know, kind of definitely grew up in this situation where I think we thought if boys were serious and not nice, it meant they were having deep, meaningful thoughts, when actually they just weren't being very nice. It is a little bit crushing when you realise, you know, a character that you loved so much that you thought you loved so much. It's actually a total asshole. Now for lips, I would have used something deep colour, like a deep burgundy or a really dusky greyish pink. Nothing girly. And then I would have kind of put it on like a bit of a stain. So I'm gonna take the Self lipstick in Razzle Dazzle Red. I'm just gonna pop them on. And then I use my finger. Whoa, got some pigment. We've done the old blot. Going again. I don't reckon I was using lip liner at all back then. But if I did use lip liner, it was definitely MAC Spice. Regardless of what colour lipstick I was wearing, it was definitely all about MAC Spice in the 90s, baby. The other celebrity that I absolutely loved in the 90s and I still love today was Keanu Reeves. I remember writing him a letter. He was the one celebrity that I felt compelled to try and get a letter to his agent telling him of my great love for him. And you know, that was 30 years ago and I'm still waiting for you to write back, Keanu. Call me. Okay, so I would have, with my hair, totally flat ironed it within an inch of its life. So this is the final look. Grungy, very imperfect eyes, looking tired, no bronzer, looking matte. Let me turn the light down so it's not reflecting. Oh yeah, now you can really see the under eye circles. I still kind of like it though. This lip needs to be a bit more worn in, like I've been pashing some guy in a bush at a bonfire party. There we go. Okay, so well, I will pop in a photo of my before and after so you can see. How did I do? Does this bring back memories for anybody? It certainly did for me. Might just have to go hunt out some vintage cargo pants and a crop top, start singing some All Saints songs. Alright, have a great day everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!